Hello and welcome to the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. My name is Matt. I'm joined once again by co-host Patty.
Hello, and this episode is brought to us by StartPlaying.Games. They are the sponsor of our episode today, and if you head to the link in the description, you can get $10 off your first subscription to Start Playing. They're sponsoring us today in part because we had a topic that they asked, hey, are you guys interested in speaking about this? And it was literally the first thing that I put on the docket when I came on as co-host, and that is West March's style D&D play. I've run the biggest, most successful campaign I've ever run was West March's over about 4 years, and it's been an incredibly joyful experience for me as a GM. And Start Playing is about to offer, as part of their service, ways to make running a West March's even more accessible. And part of what I'm interested in talking about today is the importance of having a hub in order to facilitate and host West March's play. But we should dial back and talk about what West March's play is. What's your perspective? If you were to define it, what's your picture of West March's, Matt?
So I'll actually go a layer further out than that. So why do we even call it a West March's style game is really interesting. It was from a module, and it was this module set in the West Marches, which is a march is like a kind of borderland, a sort of hinterland.
Yeah, it's like the idea of crossing a threshold into a new unexplored territory.
Yep, yeah, exactly. Generally overseen by a marshal, as it happens. Yep, and that. Or a Margate is one of the other ones. So this particular module was really good for having basically large drop-in, drop-out groups, because what it effectively delivered was this continuous, robust, living world where things progressed on a very structured timescale, and individual groups might go out and do particular individual things. The net structure of that is, if you therefore have 12 players and on any given week, in any given session, 4 of them are available and they go off and do this thing, then that thing gets done. So it might be, hey, there's some weird noises from, the crypt in the swamp to the south. And then they go and clear out the crypt in the swamp to the south. And then whenever the other players happen to show up at the table, hey, that crypt in the swamp in the south has been cleared out. And then they might go and do something else. It's a really great structure for that classic hack and slash job board style thing where you're often operating out of a hub location, a central location, and you're traveling outward to specific locations of interest in different permutations. It's actually a really great way to very closely deliver that adventurer fantasy of being a jobbing adventurer.
Yeah. And what I've run as well, I also find it facilitates that fantasy on one hand, and then the other thing that it facilitates is the true feeling of being engaged in a fantasy epic like Game of Thrones, where you have multiple individuals, multiple factions, all operating simultaneously, sometimes along the same aims, but sometimes at odds with one another. And this is the experience that the players have. They automatically fall into particular plot lines or missions. They become associated with particular groups. And before they know it, they are creating problems for other players at the table, which then they all need to solve together. It's a beautiful mess.
It's almost the apotheosis of the living world when you're trying to run sort of very immersive sandboxes.
Yeah.
So let's now get into some of the key structural differences, because there's 2 interesting things to talk about. I want to talk about some of the benefits of that style of play as a GM and player, but I also want to talk about the structural differences as a GM specifically and how you approach creating these sorts of campaigns and then running them. And you mentioned in particular having a centralized place that you can organize the games themselves in a meta way.
Yeah.
Whether that's a Discord server or a forum or a group chat or whatever it happens to be. So how do you go about actually organizing a West Marches game with, 10 to 20 players?
I'd recommend going to, part of what popularized West Marches was this guy called Ben Robbins, who in 2008 started a blog. And if you look him up, it's all still there. It was about his West Marches game that he ran for his community. And he opens it basically with the three organizational tenets that go out to the player base. The first organizational tenet is there is no regular time. Every session has to be scheduled by the players organically. So as a GM, if you don't like the fact that you are the person who is not only planning the game, but organizing when you're going to play and where you're going to play and who's going to be there, West Marches is a great solve because the onus is very much on player-driven choices. I still produce a quest board for them to go and look-see at, and I give them a map to go and look at. But that's the first thing.
It's the ultimate level of player buy-in because
Hopefully,
they have to care so much that they wrangle other people to go and get a session together and go sit down and play.
Which was so joyful as a GM. Such a great time. The second thing is that obviously, that you've spoken to before, there's no regular party. You might have 10 to 14 people who are all using the same hub to organize, and they might be mates, they might be people who know each other tangentially, but it's a great way of opening up. For example, I have workmates who I like to play D&D with, and I have very good friends who I like to play D&D with. And a West Marches framework allows more people than would traditionally be invited into a campaign. One of the things that was a struggle up until I started running West Marches was that I had lots of friends who were kind of like, could I come and play your game for like a session? And I'm like, that is not how it works. It is a bit more involved than that. And I would love you to come and join, but there wasn't a way of organically going like, yeah, you can jump in for one session. With West Marches, that is entirely achievable.
So I've got a question then. In the course of running this West Marches campaign, obviously you note that the expectation is that players aren't necessarily going to be in the same combinations. It might be a slightly different group of people session to session. But did you find that it tended to trend in towards certain groups?
Oh yeah, it trended toward factions, which was really interesting.
Right.
So like in the setting, I ran the Dungeon Dudes Dungeons of Drakenheim book, which I read it, and their world is called Westmar, and I've always wanted this question answered. I've gone Googling for it, but I was kind of like Westmar, and it pinged West Marches to me, and I was looking for something that I thought I could run for a larger group. So I encountered both West Marches and this book at the same time, and that book has an incredible faction system. Like there is evil spy-like mages faction. There are basically your Night's Watch faction. There is a Thieves Guild faction, and players were drawn toward different factions, and then they would form mini parties who would follow mini arcs. For example, I had a group who was deep in with the Green Cloaks, who were the Night's Watch, and another group who were actively fighting against the Thieves Guild, and then they dovetailed into each other, which was really, really satisfying.
So how then did you handle, let's say you've got a group of players who are largely getting deeper and deeper into one particular faction's plot and the things that they are up to. How do you then handle that player or a player from that group of people ending up in a session with a different group of players where what they want to do actively moves against that faction? Like, how does that actually get handled in the game?
In that game, it was because there are factions gathered around a ruined city. That ruined city has had a huge meteorite crash into it, and every faction wants something from the meteorite. But ultimately, the central threat is the eldritch horror that is creeping from that meteorite. So there was way that we had to cross over, but sometimes, for example, another important thread of that game is there is a mysterious heir to the throne. It's strongly encouraged that you seed that within the party. I seeded it 3 times within 3 different players in the party, and that led to, we spoke about it on the TPK episode. It led to an episode where both of those players went like, we've learned that the other is an heir to the throne. We want to have an episode where it's just us 2 and we hash it out. And 2 men entered. They thought that 1 man would survive, but ultimately neither of them did.
Neither survived. The actual heir did.
It's a deadly. It can be a deadly game as well.
Yes.
In a way that is really fun, because as soon as you, like in the case of the West Marches that I ran, that was part of the established group expectation. Like almost everyone lost a character. Some people lost 2 or 3. And that was part of the fun of it. And then you join it as a new character, but you join with an opposite faction or a different group. Ultimately, we all found our way to this moment where several factions were completely disbanded, completely thrown out of the game, and then those ones that were remaining collaborated together to work against the alt threat. Very satisfying, though. So
tenet number 3, I believe there was a third one.
Third one is what we're just speaking about. There is no plot, and that is established at the beginning. The players' decisions will guide where they go and what they do. For example, I had no BBEG in mind. I just had a bunch of characters who then ended up becoming so antagonized by the party that they became the main antagonists. No overarching plot, but there is an overarching world. Is the third part. That Robbins identifies. And that world is represented by a map, and that map can start completely blank, and you discover it piece by piece. In the case of Drakenheim, I had this beautiful central city map, but it was, no one's been into this city for 10 years. You are the first people revisiting each district as you go on in, and the unfolding of the map, the discovering what's in there, the breadcrumbs and the hooks that I'd laid down, led toward the plot that we went down, which was very different to the plot as written in the book. But if there's one great strength of that source, it's that it's an incredible living setting, which is either you're generating that as a GM, and I would say in that case, go to modules, like find a bunch of modules, find a bunch of dungeons that inspire you, short form adventures that you want to populate the world with, or you find something that's already like deeply well suited to the West Marches style.
It is a very robust structure for that drag and drop style of play where you go, yeah, this is cool, I'll put this in, this is great, I'll put this in. And it's also really good for recycling content.
Yeah.
If something from a previous campaign didn't end up getting used, put it into your West Marches game. Yeah. If something in your West Marches game ends up kind of getting closed off forever, just retool it and put it somewhere else. We want to talk about, I call it recycling roads untraveled. We're going to talk about that in another episode somewhere down the line. So look, we've got a bit of time left. The other thing I want to then talk about is some of that player experience, some of the reasons why you as a player might want to play in a West Marches game, some of the unique experiences that you can get from it. Because as we were sort of explaining the premise of this, the first thing that came to my mind as I was describing this concept of, this particular group of people go out and clear the noisy crypt in the South Marshes, some other player, let's say it's you, shows up to, the next session that happens to be scheduled. They see the job board. They're like, oh, someone cleared out that crypt. And then they also see, a notice saying, like, funeral for Roland the Brave at 3 p.m. Friday, and they're like, like something in that crypt got Roland the Brave.
When my two players went mano a mano and they both died, they just showed up at the next game. They played out with a completely new character, and the rest of the players in the player group went crazy on the thread, going like, by the by, it looks like Oswin and Enoch both died? ? It was very satisfying for them. So as a player, if you enjoy that sense of living world, and if you're finding that you really want to immerse yourself in that, West Marches is great for that. Also recommending West Marches to you as a player or a GM if you are sick of the slow death of a small game. If scheduling becomes difficult for your group of 5 or 6, pitch and go like, can we make a West Marches work? Because that was one of the principal joys was a player goes, hey, I'm going to go to Europe for 6 months. Ta-ra, I'll see you back in Drakenheim at the end of that time.
Meanwhile, in the game itself, they're like recovering from cholera or something. Yeah. Like they're just like laid out for 6 months wintering.
Yeah, because another cool part that Robbins establishes, which key to my game as well, was that there is a town. The town is safe. There is there are wilds, and the wilds are dangerous. While you're in the town, your character cannot die. You can live, work, shop, live there. But the adventure of every session will involve you going out into the wilds and returning to the town. So narratively, it's also protected. You don't have to come up with too many gimmicks. A player hasn't been around for a while. You just ask, so how have you been surviving in Emberwood, our town across this time? And they went like, oh, I got a cold. I was like in bed for a while. I had to go look after this other player character who's been building a house canonically. It all feeds in a very organic way.
You can even write yourself out fully for a little bit if you need to. You go, oh, I got word that my favorite cousin passed and I had to travel back home for the service. And traveling home takes 2 months, right?
And you're not allowed with the player, like a traditional game, you're stuck in the middle of a dungeon, you've got your 5 people, somebody goes through a bad breakup, and then they can't be there for months at a time. You don't have to hand wave that as a GM. No one needs to take control of the character for a period of time. The buzzword verisimilitude of it is really landed.
The funny thing with that is I actually use a similar gimmick for explaining why characters aren't there when a player is absent in my not West Marches style campaign. It's like, oh, they've got a stomachache, they've got food poisoning, or they're laid out with the flu, because, dude, who wants to fight a dragon when you're laid out with the flu, right? Like, truly, and maybe another player is happy running it. But it's interesting because one of the reasons I run for such big groups, because I do my comfort zone is sort of between 6 to 8 players. And actually, it's because it's just so robust from a scheduling standpoint. I find if I've got a 4-player group, that's a really nice number to be running for. As soon as you are down 1 player, the whole thing's a wash, and it very quickly falls apart. So I suppose it sort of redoubles that benefit. I guess a final note that I want to leave us off with here that we've skirted around the edges of, but haven't really gone into. We haven't really said explicitly. Keep in mind with a West Marches style game, they are a lot more gamey. They are much more gamified. There may be a hexagonal gridded map, and you can move a certain number of hexes, every adventuring day. There will be set lengths of passage of time. Each session might consist of a week that passes in universe, and if you don't play in that session, that week still passes in the game's world for your character, even if you're not there. There will be those extra gamified elements compared to a game that may feel a bit more organic and, to that end, potentially a bit more immersive. Just keep that in mind ahead of time. Do we have any final thoughts on West Marches, or do you want to take us out?
I'm just going to go. My last 2 big selling points. If you've never experienced with running a game fully XP-based, if you've mostly run like milestone-based for leveling, West March is incredible for XP because I had characters who were 14th level in the final encounter, and I had characters who were 5th level in the final encounter. And it was a beautiful experience for everyone involved, and very, very exciting.
Asterisks on that, we're going to need to do an episode on how to actually handle that at the table.
I loved it.
Big level gaps.
So very much fun.
Final selling point.
Final selling point is, for me, like West Marches style play reinvigorated my experience as a DM. It really brought together a huge number of players. We did a lot of work online together. But ultimately, I think I did less work as a GM. I think that I got a lot of fun out of it, but a lot of the work went on to the players. And if you can find a way in order to gather everyone online, be that a blog, be that Start Playing, be that a website that you create yourself, a place where they can see the map, they can see that XP going up, they can see the quest boards, they can check out who is in the party and who has died. It's a really thrilling style of play. I really hope that you give it a try. Thank you for joining us here on The One Shot Show, and we'll see you next time.
If you're enjoying listening to The One Shot Show, why not support us on Patreon? Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow, where you'll be able to find video versions of our episodes, long-form bonus episodes that we release every single month, access to our community Discord server. You can pose questions for our special Q&A episodes, and if you back at the higher tiers, you can even vote on what questions we cover in our show. Check it out.